Welcome, everyone, to the Wrestling Informer. This is the new show where Billy has now branched out and he is not behind a paywall. So when this tree falls, someone will hear it, Billy. Someone will hear it. I'm Cab Manning. I'm from the Lingus Mafia podcast. Everything is at Lingus Mafia. I will be driving this car as Billy will take us through all of your bits and news. His new Twitter, finally, he has, and that is at Billy K100 since he's linked with Conan. And this show will be K100 Informer on Twitter. So be sure to jump on there for all of your wrestling news. We are going to start with a couple things that happened this last weekend at Extreme Rules for the WWE and then went into Raw. And then we are going to give you a slew of news that Billy has that is very hot off the presses. I've been going through it and I will drive him through this show, and it'll be very interesting what we have to hear from him. So starting off,
and you'll act interested in wrestling because the last
I do like the news.
And the last guy I did this show with, the back and forth, he don't care about the wrestling at all.
You know what's funny is the wrestling that's going on. I prefer the news to the actual show that I've been watching for wrestling. I do get excited still when there's a pay-per-view a little bit. Like that thought is in me of, oh, there's, a pay-per-view today. I rub my hands together. Ooh, we got pay-per-view. And literally it started, the pay-per-view started and I went, this is Raw without commercials. It dropped for me very quickly.
It was one of the few pay-per-views I didn't watch live. I actually watched it the next day.
I mean,
but I was up.
You have options.
I was up. I did have it on the iPad, and I figured like I don't actually want to watch the pay-per-view like this. I don't want to watch it in the iPad because I know the product hasn't been good, but it's not to the point where I'm down on it to the point where I want to watch the Green Bay Packers game on the screen and then watch the wrestling on the iPad. I'd rather just say I'll save it. My son comes home from school tomorrow. If it's a major pay-per-view, we'll stay up and watch it together. And this wasn't a major pay-per-view, but with me not finding out the results until after school on Monday, it became more major. So it was a win-win. I didn't watch it on Sunday, one of the rare times I didn't do that. I watched the Packers game. They won and then.
Yeah. Speaking, little side note, just to mention football. Fausti, my co-host for Lingus Mafia, he is at this game, right, in Santa Clara. And they score. And I look at him, being a Bears fan, I know about that guy who wears number 12 on the other side. I'm very aware of him. If there's a second team that I know most about, it's probably the Packers because I'm so focused on them. I told him, 3 passes and a field goal. I said 3 passes and a field goal. He threw the ball 3 times and they kicked the field goal and won. And I go, there you go. My cousin goes, no, this isn't Chicago. I go, it matter, dude. I go, everyone backs up with defense and lets it happen. But that's on another show that we do.
And just a quick note to Adam, who's going to be editing this. I apologize because Cav, I don't think I told him that we monetize this content on YouTube. And all of his Fs are going to be bleeped out.
Oh, so, you got to tell me I can't swear. I had no idea.
Well, you can.
Okay.
You can. It has to be like when Mick Foley does his stand-up where he says, I got 2 F-bombs I want to use for my career. And it's
I got you.
And it's like that. So we can remember it. But, I see Conan and Disco. They don't give a shit. And Adam has to go through that. And it's like,
hey, I can control myself if I need to. I'll pretend I'm talking to my grandmother. So is there anything that sticks out to you with Extreme Rules that you thought was, I know a lot of the stuff we're going to get to in the news, some of the things that happen on Extreme Rules, because we were also saying, oh, well, pay attention to Raw and to the pay-per-view because people who lose are probably getting switched over to the other side. It's almost like they're leaving a company they have to lose.
Mm-hmm.
So is there anything that stood out to you in this pay-per-view that was, I mean, we said nothing really was going to happen. We expected nothing to happen.
I think just this increase of this dynamic between AEW versus WWE fans, where WWE laughed at their finish with the exploding ring And then they responded by saying what a terrible finish it was with the demon, with the top rope breaking. And then obviously, then I saw WWE fans digging up when Evan Bourne just completely slipped off the top rope. Not Evan. What's his name now?
Matt Sydal.
Yeah, that's it.
His real name.
Yeah. So yeah, this stupid back and forth where we say, look, if one gets better, the other one will get better. It's better for everybody to get better. So we're not in that side where we're like, oh, I want this one to win or I want that one to win. Perhaps that was our stance when the real Monday Night Wars were going on.
Yeah.
I know it was for you, but at the moment, the better AEW gets, the better number it gets. If they win, nothing's going to be better than them actually beating Raw for 1 week, and the response that would actually generate. I mean, we're already seeing a better Raw, not a great Raw, but 2 better Raws from at least it being competitive for a couple of weeks.
Now, you notice that I thought it was blatantly obvious and like sore thumb obvious when Lashley started cursing. And I said, oh, this is the answer now because all AEW says is so now they're like, oh, we could get away with saying that. Let's say that. And Lashley addressed Big E with that. And I was like, oh, okay, they haven't done this.
But that was on pay-per-view. So
and they played it on Raw too.
Exactly as is without any editing.
Yes. Playing out, played. And I was like in the opening and I was like, wow, here we go. This is the this is what AEW does. And they're like, oh, well, I guess we could do this now. Let's get edgy because this is what's selling. So that's what they decided to do. It's the first thing I thought. I
heard that the NXT 2.0 might be edgy, but I'm not sure how far they can go on Raw and SmackDown. I would definitely go down the route of having one being edgier than the other because at the moment, there's no real difference. One's 3 hours, one's 2 hours. One is better to watch, but only for storyline reasons, not in terms of the explicitness of the content or anything like that. It's just down to the fact that SmackDown is a better book show within its 2 hour parameter because they have less talent to focus on because they're drafted over less people to deal with. And they seem to utilize people better over the course of 2 hours. Plus you have the Roman thing, which is the overriding big storyline in the whole company, the main event of every pay-per-view. So that helps as well.
Now the ending before we get into Raw, because so the rope breaks, right? And I'm always fascinated by I'm like, oh, wow, like, how do they do these things? You know, it's like, how do they make this thing go off inside the little tube that's holding the rope that snaps and everything falls? And I don't mind that this is what happens. However, you need an explanation for this. It's like, oh, the gods came down and didn't want Finn to win, so the rope broke. There's no, it's not like he's Yokozuna where he ripped off the tie and it was like, oh, he's too fat and himself. Sorry. But it's like that. So that's what the only problem I have with the issue.
Yeah, it's not like Keith Lee or somebody like that where that would have been a reason for it. It's just I don't think they will explain it. I think they'll move on to Brock and Roman, but we'll see. I don't think the pay-per-view was particularly good. I don't think the pay-per-view needed to be seen. There was nothing there you needed to be seen. The write-off of Alexa is interesting. I have that as a news piece, but as we've organically flowed into it, this piggyback, her time off now that's about to come, piggybacks off her not being granted her release back when Bray left the company. She was getting a lot of on social media. So I think that was the point where she decided that, I'm getting married. I've accumulated enough money. I'm marrying someone with money. These are not facts in terms of me saying, oh, hey, I had a conversation with Alexa Bliss and she told me that I've got enough money and my boyfriend's got money. But I'm saying that maybe these were the factors that came in, like in terms of she's been there at a decent level of the company since 2016, right? Mm-hmm. She's also married to someone going to be married to someone who makes money as well. So unless you have ridiculous spending habits under the current WWE contracts and what they pay for established performers like that, I mean, she's doing $600 cameos as well. So I mean, not that she sells any, but the point is that
No
the point
kidding.
is that she's turning around and going, "Hey, I make enough money. I ain't getting out of bed and doing messages for these marks unless I'm getting $600
Sure.
for it." Right. So you see, when you price yourself up accordingly to what you would do certain things for. I mean, that was one of my issues with Russo. It's like what he decided to pay me when he said that he was going to pay me instead of making his podcast on a poll commitment weekly, where we're supposed to do, I do a show, you do a show, I do a show, you do a show. And what he decided to pay me to compensate for going monthly instead of weekly, I would not do content for that at this point in my life. Maybe when I was 18, that would be decent money for me, but not anymore. And that's the thing. So for her, she's with her doing £600 cameos and being well paid in the company for ages, I think that would have contributed to her release. Plus, obviously, we've lost Cav. I'll just carry on talking. Obviously, Alexa can go somewhere else. I think AEW, whereas they're signing everybody on the men's side of things, they're not necessarily strong on the women's side. So when you're looking at an established performer like an Alexa, a Charlotte, or a Sasha, AEW would take him. Or if she doesn't want to be in wrestling at all, she can sit out for a couple of years, then come back to the WWE. She can look at an acting career. She can look at a presenting career. I think Alexa Bliss is someone that feels that she has options, doesn't need to sit there and be unhappy with a company she's not happy with, and taking from trolls on a week-to-week basis to the point where, you know, she has stalkers, regular stalkers. We hear about her having stalkers and weirdos contacting her all the time. So she asked for her release anyway at the start of August, which was not granted, but she's been compensated with this upcoming time off that we're about to see.
It is odd that you figure if she's going to be off for an amount of time, she got a new outfit for this whole thing. And then, I mean, the botch of putting the Alka-Seltzer in her mouth with the camera zooming in while it's sitting on her tongue so she could foam, if you caught that. And then having the Lily doll ripped apart, which I'm assuming it was going to be turned into Chucky when she comes back, like it'll be all sewn back together. But then I was also thinking she's going to come back normal. Like this puts her over the edge to come back.
Yeah,
and be normal again.
And a key part of that is merchandising numbers. And merchandising numbers, because it's my first show here on K100, I know it was a very popular show over on Russo's brand when this show was called the Nitty Gritty Dirt Show. So I think it's a great place to start, where we run through those merchandise numbers and my merchandise story. But we'll do Raw first if you have anything to say about that, and then we'll move on to it.
Yeah. With quickly, a couple things on Raw is we see the Hurt Business getting back together. A lot of things that happen on this pay-per-view and on Raw are going to be in our news because there's a lot of piggybacking off of things that happened. Mm-hmm. Now, Hurt Business coming back, I almost think, did WWE realize we have nothing for these guys to do? Why did we split them up in the first place? Oops, I got to put them back together.
Yeah, I think he felt like that Bobby Lashley, I know he felt like we wanted Bobby Lashley to be a standalone champion that didn't have that group with him. So I felt that that was a weird decision. There's been champions that have had groups before. Bret Hart had the Hart Foundation behind him. Hogan had the NWO behind him. I know we're going way back, but I don't understand how being in a faction really hurts you or makes you look like a weaker champion. But that's the decision that Vince came to, that he didn't need all of these guys along with him, and they were going to book him strong enough. But again, we've seen two championship runs ended abruptly. You thought Drew was going to go the full year, and they decided to go with Lashley. And then after Lashley, you're now going with Big E. It didn't build to, like, no pun intended, like big endings that both of these reigns were going to have. I mean, Drew was cashed in on by The Miz, who lost to Lashley and couldn't get his belt back. And then we saw another cash in, this time on Lashley, so by Big E. So it's not very creative where you're seeing these guys both losing their belts in the same way. I don't know how long-term they look at the Money in the Bank cash-ins. I know how long-term they look at the winners because I knew Big E was winning it a while ago before he did. But I don't know how long-term they look at these cash-ins. With you building up Lashley and Goldberg clearly being for the belt, I would think that was a very, very short-term decision on the basis that AEW had a really good week. And the idea being that, hey, Big E's going to cash in on Lashley after he beats Goldberg in Saudi anyway. Why don't we just do it on Raw and just not have that match be for the title? I think that was the thinking, that it made a very minimal difference.
And they've done this formula to where everyone knows, and I think we've all known for years, when you start off Raw with like a main event, you know it's not finishing in that first segment, and that it'll be at the end of the show.
Well,
eventually.
you especially know if you're at the show and you see a cage at the top of the building, which they obviously didn't put up halfway through.
You know, that was in my head the entire time. I'm like,
what's that,
I
Mom?
hope people
What's
come
that,
out.
Mommy?
Yeah. I hope they come out with the cage to put up, because I go, you spoil it right off the bat. I don't think people go, I wonder what's going to be that cage match tonight. And if the main event's starting the show, how could this be? So that happens, but you can tell that they are trying a little harder now on Raw. It didn't seem, it's not a good show still. It's not like, oh, this is a great Raw. It did seem a little better now that they're trying.
How do you not try coming out of the pandemic? When you come out of the pandemic and your fans are back, it's like, I mean, I know they did for that first show. I remember, but, almost over trying, where Vince was like, haha, let's beat Karrion Kross. No one will expect it. It's like, well, that's stupid. Well, and I think, he was told that was stupid, but the philosophy is that when we're live, anything can happen. We need to send that message from the get-go. We need to set that message from the very beginning. But then what you got was weeks and weeks and weeks of crappy television. So the message was kind of lost, and it was a stupid thing to do, because the guys never quite recovered from those pointless losses he had at the start, because he started 1-2, losing to Hardy, and then beating Keith Lee, then losing to Keith Lee. But everybody thought, well, these fake dirt sheets thought that, oh, he's going to keep losing till he gets put back with Scarlett. And I said, yeah, that's not the idea. Like, the idea was simply for him to come in and win. And Vince decided, hey, let's make him lose, because nobody will expect that. But what's the long-term goal? Nothing. It's just to shock people for one night, to show them that this is going to be an unpredictable show now that fans are back. Well, that didn't last. But what he hasn't lost, he hasn't lost since he turned into the bondage guy. That he has been undefeated as a bondage gear wearing wrestler.
Yeah, he did not show up originally as bondage before he had that loss to Jeff Hardy. That's still shocking, that Mr. Undefeated, and he's in the middle of a crazy program on NXT about being a monster. He gets pinned by Jeff Hardy. The only thing I take from this show is the end, that Big E flat out won. People still trying to interfere. What else do you think on that show?
No, I just think what you tweeted me something interesting. I replied to you. I don't know if you saw it, where you're talking about, oh, how can Riker lose like this now when he was getting a push? Yes.
And that's one of your news stories about how this could happen.
Yeah, well, it's not, as I said, it's not a fact, but I would speculate that he's been off TV because he's one of those people among the high percentage of people, 30% of people in the WWE that are unvaccinated, and he's one of them. So his push has now turned into him losing to Karrion Kross, where he was having his own push. But the thing is that you can't afford to do this to other people like Sasha Banks, because Sasha Banks will happily sit at home and sit out that contract, and she'll go to the other company where they now have a desperate agenda to sign more women. So the women are in a much stronger position than the men in this company at the moment.
And one of the things you were talking about when it came to the women was something that Bianca said in the ring.
What was that? Sorry, just remind me.
About telling the truth about late notice.
Yeah. So if we move on to that story, and then we'll I want to get the merchandise story done early, so that we have enough time to cover it extensively.
Sure, we'll go right into the news after this, because I don't think anything else was noteworthy of Raw to talk about.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a news piece in itself, but Bianca Belair did an interview this week where she turned around and said that she was working with, when she found out she was working with Becky Lynch, it was like a few hours before or the day before. I can't remember exactly when. I don't know if she's embellishing or whatever, but it was very, very close to that. Now, this is a story we've covered before over on Russo's show and over on the dirtysheets.com, where I break all my news first. But it's worth talking about again when Bianca this week has said that she genuinely only found out she was facing Becky on the day of, or very, very close to the start of SummerSlam. That was down to the situation where WWE genuinely felt that Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair was happening. When WWE were continuing to say it, obviously not until the point where they said that it's going to be on the show. Because you remember they aired the video package for it. And then the announcer said Sasha Banks is not here. At that point, you're lying to people. But there were periods throughout the week where they were not lying to people. They even had like Sasha do little bits during the week with over in, I believe she did an interview with WWE Germany, etc.
Do you think this is a case of beyond arrogance by Sasha, as in she knows the rules? This is before a big event for the company she is employed by that has promoted her. And do you think she's like, it's not like they're going to take me out of this. They can't. I've been promoted this much. They can't take me out of this. What are they going to do? And she just goes and does her stuff like, you know, my ass doesn't stink and she'll get away with this. And they're like, oh, is that right? We'll just take your ass out.
Here's the more interesting thing, and this is information that I've not even been able to get, and I've tried to find out over this last week. What is the deal with her coming back now? Because she did essentially something similar to what Ultimate Warrior did. And we're looking like, how old is that SummerSlam? 30 years ago? 30 years ago. SummerSlam 91, where he turned around to Vince and said, I'm not happy with my Mania payout. And I want my SummerSlam payout up front before, I could believe that, something to that extent. And he was fired immediately afterwards. Well, this girl turned around and went, I'm not coming in because I don't like these rules, and I'm not gonna adhere to these rules. And I'll do the match. I'll turn up for SummerSlam as long as you tell me that I no longer have to stick by them. So they didn't tell her that. They replaced her. She obviously missed a load of other shows. She wasn't even going to be allowed into Madison Square Garden initially until Madison Square Garden had to adjust their rules for our other unvaccinated talents at a higher level than Sasha, which of course is Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns, who's immunocompromised by his leukemia, so he can't be vaccinated anyway. To which Madison Square Garden had to make exceptions for Brock and for Roman. So I'm wondering if the exceptions have benefited Sasha, whether there's a loosening of this because the WWE turn around and go, hey, every time Brock's there, he's not going to be vaccinated and we can't make him do. So whether it's a case of they've now given up on these policies, because I literally have the handout right here, and this was a real thing, but it's not something that's been successful. If the idea was that we are going to secure 100% vaccinations from this, or even 98% vaccinations from this, and we can release the other 2%, you know, these 7 or 8 guys, with the way that they've been releasing people this year, down to the fact that they can release people because last year, the year 2020, every single talent essentially breached contract without reaching their minimum date quota. So the WWE now are in a position where they have a whole bunch of talent who didn't work their minimum dates last year. Therefore, a clause in the contract can be activated where contracts are lessened, renegotiated, or completely ripped up, which is what they've done with several deals, especially ones where we've seen guys not working their notice, the 90 days. But in some cases, like a Kevin Owens, for example, contracts have been renegotiated and shortened. And in some cases, we've just seen guys flat out released very, very early on. So yeah, I'm just surprised by a lot of this with her being back.
So, Wrestling Informer, tell us the top sales for merch, WWE Superstar?
What did you just say? WWE superstar?
Yeah. Who's the top sales in merchandise? It's a WWE superstar? Or is it a WWE superstar?
It's John Cena. So I guess technically,
Eh. Is he there? But then there's another guy too who's doing a lot of sales. Is he there?
So what I'll do is I'll read through the story because I've just got it up on my Patreon. So this is an opportunity for me to do that. So the way this show essentially works, or how it worked with Russo, was that my stories go up over the course of the week over at my website, thedirtysheets.com, which is my Patreon page. You get my wrestling news for just $5 a month. I don't do a whole load of stories. I do detailed stories that are all 100% correct. So yeah, I may only do 4 things a month. I may do 8 things a month. I probably won't do more than that, but you can be rest assured that everything that I post is the right information. So there's a detailed story here about the quarterly merchandise sales. So merchandise, like the quarterly numbers, is also declared quarterly. And the big news, or the most surprising development of the merchandise quarter so far has been the fact that WWE is shocked by Fiend merchandise. Now, the story I wrote up here is, despite being released on July the 31st, the Fiend continues to move significant amounts of merchandise. Since the Fiend first appeared in WWE's quarterly merchandising report in November 2019, Wyatt has been either number 1 or number 2 on the overall merchandising chart. Overall merchandising. Now, this is important. I'm going to stop the story here and explain this in more details. Overall merchandising takes into consideration the number of units they have available versus number of units sold, which is a better indicator for future merchandising revenue than overall merchandising sold. Now, what that means is Bray Wyatt has 25 items of merchandise, and every single item has sold 1,000 pieces, right? 1,000 pieces of everything, and obviously at a higher price bracket as well. But Roman Reigns has 200 pieces of merchandise. And I'm not using real numbers here. I'm doing the most simple math so you can really work out the equation. If Roman Reigns has 200 pieces of merchandise and they're all selling 20, 25 pieces, then Bray Wyatt to them per merchandise looks like the hotter prospect. So in terms of the equation being quantity over number of items over price point, which is the price of the item. So Bray Wyatt is in a more expensive bracket. He has a much bigger selection of more expensive merchandise. He has less merchandise than Roman, but he has high quantities on each individual piece of merch. Now, obviously, if he had 2 pieces of merch and they sold, 2,000 pieces each, but Roman had 200 pieces of merch and they were all like moving steadily, they would turn around and go, okay, they're after his merch. We need to make more of it, but we cannot declare that this is the number 1 guy based on the fact that we've almost got stuff which is limited edition. You need to have a decent sample size. But at this point in time, Wyatt was number 1 in terms of using this metric as opposed to looking at the overall unit sales. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The February 2020 quarter saw the Fiend rise from number 1 to number 2 on the basis that his 26 pieces of merchandise had sold better per unit and at a higher average price point than Roman Reigns' 100 plus pieces of merchandise. The ratio was so dominant that the Fiend was actually closing in on Roman on the overall charts. What that means is that the 26 pieces of merch that he had sold nearly more in overall quantity, not just per piece. So yeah, he was shifting thousands of everything that he had, lanterns, t-shirts, masks, all that. He was doing tons and tons of that, but the total amount of those 26 items almost overtook the 100 plus items that Roman Reigns had, which he actually did do eventually. The Fiend would overtake Roman Reigns on both charts. So the overall chart, which is the main indicator, and the quantity chart by April 2020. and he remained the dominant seller on both charts throughout the pandemic. Moving on to the present day, the WWE have recently been shocked to learn that The Fiend's merchandise is continuing to move in surprisingly high quantities as he remains ahead of every main roster talent with the exception of Roman Reigns. A large quantity of Fiend merchandise was put on sale following the release. However, and you can go check this, this resulted in The Fiend temporarily being catapulted back to the #1 seller for a fortnight. But only for that short period, as the WWE reacted to this by quickly restoring large quantities of clearance merchandise back to full price. His $15 plastic mask continued to be very hot sellers at the recent live events. The Fiend is currently poised to chart in third place in the November quarterly. So we're only 1 month away now, and he's in third place. And he will surprisingly finish ahead of Becky Lynch, Drew McIntyre, RK Bro, and The New Day, which still includes Big E because there hasn't been a separate merchandising contract worked out. And for Kofi Kingston, there never was. Despite the quarter being pushed, despite the quartet being pushed on television. John Cena is set to lead the quarter with Roman Reigns sitting at #2. And here's the funny part that Cav was referring to. Stone Cold Steve Austin is also set to make his return to the top 10 as towns continue to buy his city customized 316 t-shirts with the likes of London 316, Glasgow 316, and New York 316 being red hot sellers recently. And two of those were during the UK tour. The biggest disappointments of the month, and you can probably see this from what's happening on television, are Bianca Belair, Alexa Bliss, and Nikki Ash, a trio that the company have heavily invested in relation to merchandise.
The Nikki Ash one, I'm so glad it's falling apart. It bothers me that it looks like she's popular. I'm like, stop with this nonsense.
But it's crazy because the Wyatt stuff is moving, and they figured, oh, you know what? We'll just make a different doll and a different t-shirt. We'll put all this same thing and we'll transfer it over to her. It's all just sitting there. Like, no one's buying it. Nobody wants it. The character's not over. And I think when she said, I want to leave or I need some time off, they're happy to get rid of this thing because it's just not working at all.
You would almost think they would even think about bringing Bray back because only for just the merchandise stuff and cash in the cash cow while you can.
Well, that's the thing. Dave Meltzer did a story saying that it was a budget cut. But how do you do a budget cut when someone is the #1 or 2 merchandise seller? He's on a $1 million a year guaranteed contract, and then the rest of his money is paid to him via merchandise. So if Bray Wyatt more than doubled his money last year through his merchandising, and he's only getting 15% of the sales, then the other 85% went to the WWE. So if you're paying Bray Wyatt $1 million in merchandising revenue, that means that WWE made around about $80 million. If you take away costs from and marketing, probably approximately around $65 million on his merchandise. That's not a budget cut to cut somebody who's you're paying $1 million for, and he ships $65 million of merchandise. That doesn't sound like a budget cut to me. That sounds like a creative problem.
So a couple of quick hits for you about 2 women in your stories here. Why was Toni Storm off TV for so long?
Yeah, so Toni Storm was taken off TV because it's like they hadn't seen her before. And once they did, they told her that they would like her to lose 15 pounds before she returned. And I hate doing these stories because Dave gets so much heat for the women and the weight stuff.
But he said she needed to lose weight. You're not saying it. It's right. What happened. So you're reporting it.
I liked her like that, but I like her, and it's the face for me. So
yeah,
I mean that's the thing though with that body that she had, it was surprising for me because you assume that she's buxom? Is that what they say? Is that the word?
Yeah,
Buxom,
I think
pusty,
except for the boobs,
pusty.
Sure.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You assume that it's all there. I didn't even think that I didn't even realize till you told me that, she doesn't actually have the boobs.
Yeah, you were like, no, she's got boobs. And I go, no, it's all ass. She has no boobs.
That's so weird, though. Because I've not seen that or noticed that. So,
all bottom heavy. Liv being punished for having passion.
Yeah, so this is interesting. Liv Morgan is back on television now. And previously, she was taken off television because she was supposed to win Money in the Bank, which I think everybody kind of worked out because she came onto the free show and did a promo about being in the match where she was basically crying. And everybody looked at that and thought, wow, she's winning. And then there was some false stories out where they said Liv's promo cost her the Money in the Bank. She gave the result away. They changed it or whatever. Sounds good when you see that promo and makes a lot of sense. Not actually true. She only found out that she wasn't going to be winning after that promo, so perhaps she wouldn't have cut that. But it wasn't down to the actual promo. It was down to the fact that WWE run these polls on Instagram where they ask people who's going to win all of the matches. And in their eyes, the victory of Liv Morgan was seen as a surprise. But the booking on television, because we now don't have so much of a casual fan base, we have a very, very hardcore fan base. So the booking on television kind of gave it away to people to the point where she polled well over 60% as the people's prediction to be the winner. So at that point, with Vince going down his whole stupid unpredictability route, decided to take it away from her. She did not react to that positively and was taken off TV for 3 weeks. So when she returns and was put back on pay-per-view this week, when they were readjusting the show, obviously the match that they were going to put onto the free show was Liv's match. Because obviously they wanted to see, is this girl going to have another reaction again? Because we're children and we like to haze people and we like to test people and push them to the limit. And we talk about be a star and mental health. I mean, it's the fans really. When these people like, we have these suicides in the industry, which are sad, but we also have this narrative where everybody's like, be nice to each other, be nice to each other. Whereas like they're literally
and they're the worst.
They're the worst. They're attacking people left, right, and center continuously. So WWE themselves are no better. So this girl that had a chance to win Money in the Bank, or thought she was, had it taken away from her, had a reaction to it, which I would think was understandable, was then taken off television, which in itself is a loss of income, put back on television, made to lose to Zelina, who beats nobody, and then had her match moved from the pay-per-view to the free show just to see if she would still kick up a fuss. I can't believe this is a real place run by adults.
The promo thing, the only reason I don't buy that was the reason they went, oh, well, she did this promo and it made it look like she's going to win.
Because I sent you the bet before it happened.
Well, yeah, and also that they script their promos. They don't even let them do their own speech. So I don't think she could even have said that without them saying okay.
I think they do actually on Free Show and Talking Smack.
Really?
Yeah.
They've unleashed that a little bit now, because before it was, here's your script.
Yeah, no, they're using that as a platform to see if there are people that can do this.
Oh, thank God, they're at least doing a little bit of something, opening that part at least, show their own talent to see if they can get themselves over. Punk in the MMA.
Yeah, so this is a real quick story. I actually already talked about this on Conan Show the other week and gave this away for free. But Punk in the MMA, it was a big story where Punk retired from MMA. It wasn't a big story, but it was a big deal. People made a big deal about it because they were laughing at the guy going, oh, you know that joke where someone said something and they turn around and go, I'm retiring from MMA too, and I'm retiring from MMA too. And all these people were saying that they were retiring from MMA, which is something that they obviously don't do. That was the joke. Now, Punk didn't know that he had to retire from MMA to get out of the MMA testing pool with USADA, which are the people that randomly test you. So unless you officially retire through USADA, you make a public declaration and you tell USADA that you wish to be taken out of the USADA testing pool, you're still an active fighter. So once Punk reappeared on the radar via AEW, USADA decided to go down to CM Punk's house and ask him to piss in a pot. So
of all people.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean they don't care, do they? Like that, they can't just because he has a gimmick doesn't mean that it's necessarily true. I mean, procedure is procedure. So, in order to avoid any further visits and things like that, CM Punk declared his retirement from MMA so that he didn't have to continue to be randomly tested for drugs.
And I'm sure that comes off to different people thinking, oh, see, he's up to that's why he wants to retire so they don't test him because he's on something. But okay, I can understand it's just a pain in the ass.
He's never had that body, has he? He's never had that. He's never at any point. He's always looked to me. I always look at him and go, if I put on weight like during lockdown, I always think to myself, right, I'll get back to that. I can be him in a month. I've never let myself go to the point where I'm more than a month away from being back to him because he's a guy that's pretty much my weight and height. So I look at his natural physique and think, oh, I can get back to that if I let myself go.
What do you have for some contract news? Whose contracts are coming up of note?
Well, there's three main ones, and there's other people in the company because obviously we're getting to the 1st of Jan, but there's three main ones, and they are Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, and AJ Styles. AJ Styles is the biggest one out of these. He's on the most money, which will include the tour bus and all of that kind of stuff. He's in the $1 million club, and he wasn't there initially. Initially in 2016, on his first 3-year contract, AJ Styles came in on the same money as Gallows and Anderson, which they all got they all got $750,000, and basically the opportunity to sell more merchandise, etc. But very, very quickly, actually, let me just correct that. They all came in on $500,000, and when Gallows and Anderson for some reason were ridiculously re-signed by WWE, they were paid more. They ended up getting $750,000, and they were very quickly released. I think they only had that contract for a couple of months. But as for AJ, yeah, his next contract, he was renegotiated very, very quickly once he was the WWE champion, under the same terms. So he didn't actually add any more years onto it. So he renegotiated once he was the champ, but it was still done for 2 years and 2 months as opposed to starting the 3 years again. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So he was on a 3-year deal. He was 8 months into it, and they just made it. 10 months into it, and they just made it 2 years and 2 months rather than a fresh 3-year deal. So that appearance that he made at the Royal Rumble, that's always when his contract expires. So in 2016, he signed, and it ran out in 2019. And in 2019, he re-signed the same contract for a little bit more money for 3 years again. And that now runs out in 2022 on the 1st of Jan. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. I think he'll stay. I think Sami Zayn will stay as well. At the moment, he's now being shoehorned into a Dominik Mysterio storyline. Now, this is a storyline that I talked about already with Conan, so I'm going to quickly run through it. The WWE very much wanted a Mysterio influence over Dominik so that he could turn heel and do the whole thing where I'm Eddie's son, not yours, and you take on all the Eddie Guerrero mannerisms. The problem is Vicky's in AEW and Chavo is in AEW, despite the fact that he was taken away from Andrade because they wanted to make room for Ric Flair, and I don't think that's happening now. So he's still stuck over there. So rather than trying to contact I think it's Shoal Guerrero, or anybody like that, I think they just decided not to do it. And I think we're going to get a normal heel turn. But I think the new idea, which is something Conan told me, and it looks like it's true, where Sami Zayn is going to be influencing him and manipulating the kid. So I don't think Sami's getting a new story unless he's getting a new contract. So for Sammy and AJ, I think they'll stay. For Kevin Owens and the way he's being booked on television and the social media interactions that he's had, I think he's very, very much out the door. I think Kevin Owens will be gone at the end of the year.
You know, I don't mind the Sami Zayn talking to him in the ear because the things he said were like right on. It wasn't even like, oh, I'm being a scumbag bad guy. He was saying truth to him pretty much. The whole thing that's funny to me is that they would like, you know, Chavo to come over this and that because Flair was going to be taking his spot. And oops, but they're holier than thou over at AEW, so maybe not anymore. As I used to watch soap operas back in the day, Billy, I used to watch One Life to Live until they took that off the air. Now I watch Keith Lee because he is a soap opera. This character, the change of a character, what they do to him as a human being, changing outfits. Tell me what's going on with Keith Lee.
I'm surprised that you didn't get on this on when we were on Raw because I thought it was something you'd be dying to talk about. But yeah, I mean, some of these notes were written beforehand, so unfortunately, like people have seen it, and I really do mean like unfortunately. But so Keith Lee was immediately taken off TV once he spoke out about having. For those guys coming over from Russo's brand, you know that Keith Lee having was exclusively my story. Now, these idiots like Satin and Sap, they could turn around and go, oh, we don't do stories about health. We don't do stories about mental health. And we don't do stories about pregnancy. Well,
but meanwhile, Sap's reporting on Daphne killing herself. That was mental health, right?
Step by step, like minute by minute updates.
But
like,
they don't do stories on that. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I've called the ambulance. I'm Sean Ross.
I got a crowbar. I'm trying to open a door.
Guy's an idiot.
We tried to climb up to her window. Go ahead.
But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, because we had the Bray Wyatt story, and because we knew about Becky's pregnancy, and because we knew Keith Lee had, they choose not to report on it. But the fact is that they don't have the sources to get it anyway. So one day, like further down the line, I'm quite open. I've spoke about it on Russo's show. I'll speak about it here at some point. I'm quite open about my sources, not in terms of naming them, but in terms of how it's come around that I'm able to get information whilst sitting here in London, England, whilst these marks who get themselves on the WWE conference calls and whatnot don't really get any decent information. And I think the clue lies within that. It's very difficult to play both sides of the fence. If you're going to be on the WWE conference call and you decide to go down that route, and interviews with WWE performers are very important to you, then you're going to be asked to stop breaking the news, which they don't want out there. We've already had that phone call before. Where did you get this Russo story from? Where did you get this Rusev story from? Where did you get this Lana story from? If you take this off your website, we'll sort you. We'd appreciate it, and we can give you this, that, and the other. To which me and Nick, my previous colleague, just said, no thanks. We're just going to continue to cover the news whether you like it or not. So, and the COVID story for Keith Lee falls under that category. The decision was made to take him off television and distance him a little bit from that video. At the same time, Vince then pulled the trigger on something he wanted to do for a while, where he sees Keith Lee as a heel. And Keith Lee's been working at the Performance Center, and he's been working dark matches as a heel. And that's what the Bearcat character is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a trimmed down, which I've not seen any signs of that, but a slim down Keith Lee, who's now a 100% heel. The idea will obviously be that he works with Big E down the line. The problem is you have Karrion Kross and Keith Lee on the show, both as heels, with exactly the same push. It would not surprise me to see them split in some way in the draft. But at the same time, you need viable opponents for, if you're going to go all in on Big E, you need viable opponents for this guy. So I think Lee and Kross fall under that category. You also have Damian Priest as your US champion as well. So one of them could go over in that direction. But yeah, that's what they're doing with him. He's a heel now. You haven't seen it yet from what happened this week because he squashed a comedy heel. But trust me, Keith Lee is a heel. And you'll see that in the next few weeks.
That was going to be my next question is, well, he was beating up Tozawa, so that didn't seem odd to me. Last question, and that you're going to tell us about is because the draft is this week on Friday here. And who do we think is going to be moving around? What are some of the plans that are going to happen after the brand switches, as best you know?
Unfortunately, I know you guys are seeing this on the day of the draft here, but we record a couple of days before. We are planning at some point in the future, if this is successful on this platform, to find a way to go live, take calls, chat with you guys. Well, at least let you leave comments here down the side so we can respond to questions in the comment section. We're not 100% sure about the phone calls yet because we know we're going to get trolled. But the fact is that they are very up in the air about the draft, and one of the key components here is The Rock, a guy who's not even going to be in the draft. Now, the reason why The Rock is a key component is if The Rock is locked in for WrestleMania, I don't think that you'll see Drew McIntyre and Bobby Lashley going over to SmackDown. The idea was that Drew was going over to SmackDown. I mean, this has been set in stone for some time. You've even seen him kind of been held in a holding pattern. And even if, I didn't know the guy personally, I would say the television tells me he's leaving. But that seems to be something that's changed when he's come out and confronted Big E. Now, the option is still there to do this feud very quickly at Saudi and have Drew go over to SmackDown. We could do the whole thing with, I'm going to take that belt and SmackDown are going to have 2 titles and Raw can be like, oh my God, we could lose the WWE Championship to SmackDown. And that's an option. And it's still on the table. But if The Rock is secure, I don't think McIntyre is going to go. One person I do think will go is Lashley. I feel like people are looking at this Hurt Business reunion and thinking that is designed to counteract the New Day. I think it's more designed to counteract the Bloodline. And I think that what we'll see moving forward is Bobby Lashley moving across to SmackDown and the Hurt Business going with him as we lose Cav. The Hurt Business going with him so that we can have that feud over on SmackDown. So I lost you for a second. I was saying that the Bloodline are likely to feud with the Hurt Business. I think that's been more done to even up the numbers over on SmackDown as it has been done to have this very short feud of Big E on Raw.
By chance, not to betray any confidence of talking to certain people, do you hear people say, "Oh, I wish I was over on SmackDown instead"?
No, not really. I mean, that's the thing. It's very much the same sort of people. I've been misquoted recently by saying that I said that Bruce Pritchard had been fired as a writer or replaced as a writer. Bruce Pritchard has his responsibilities reduced on a month-to-month basis on SmackDown. From the moment that Heyman came back and Michael Hayes and Paul Heyman took over the entire Roman Reigns operation, Bruce Pritchard began to delegate more and more sections of the show so that he could primarily focus on being the head writer of Monday Night Raw, which he still is from when fans returned. Now, Pritchard is still the right-hand man of Vince McMahon. He attends NXT and he attends episodes of SmackDown, but a new head writer was employed for SmackDown a while ago. I've actually forgotten his name now because it was such a long time ago that I had this story in my notes. Let me try and find it here. I don't know how I'll even search this. I don't think it's that important, to be honest with you. But
yeah, I mean,
it's just a name. But the fact is that if I get you that name, which I will do by next week, because I was just caught myself off guard. But when I get you that name, you'll see that that he even has it on his LinkedIn page. So there is a different head writer at SmackDown. But just because there's a head writer at SmackDown doesn't mean that Bruce Pritchard was fired or has had his responsibilities reduced or his importance reduced. The only thing that he has had reduced is his workload. And his workload is that I need to write an entire Raw and an entire SmackDown. That was very, very quickly overtaken by the fact that you have a Michael Hayes. At some point, you even had a Daniel Bryan doing stuff. Edge writes for himself. There's a lot less work to do with SmackDown. And you can see that it helps it being a better show. Raw is primarily the brainchild of two people. It's Vince and Bruce Pritchard without a hell of a lot of input from any other people. SmackDown is Michael Hayes and Paul Heyman doing one thing. It was temporarily Daniel Bryan contributing towards certain things. It's Edge coming in and doing all of his own stuff. It's the head writer of SmackDown then doing his own stuff. It was almost Nikki Bella coming in and running the women. But it's
like a madam.
Right. But it's not now, whether that's for the best or not.
Yes, it is for the best.
But yeah, you can see that variety in terms of having those creative influences there that take over and solely focus on one thing. When you're Bruce and you've got 3 hours of TV to write and you got, I got 3 hours to fill. 40-minute match that goes through 2 advert breaks, right? That's obviously, the way you can't focus completely on everybody when you have 3 hours to do. You should be able to do it because that's your job. But however old he is, Vince is creatively bankrupt at this point. So you get the Raw that you get. But SmackDown, you got Roman contributing towards, obviously, he has a say over what he does. You got Heyman. We know about Heyman. You have people there who are able to talk to Heyman. You have Michael Hayes there as a producer. You have TJ over there. Edge doing his own stuff. People can go to Edge and talk to him. Previously, you had Brian. You have then the actual head writer. It's just a much better show because you have much more people to bounce ideas off, and they can freshen that up with everybody taking their turns in terms of focus, and in terms of focusing solely on the one segment or the two segments that they're involved in.
Well, that is your first in the new edition of the Wrestling Informer, which will be dropping every Friday right here on our YouTube channel.
Just one thing I will say, draft people that I don't think are going to get changed at this point in time are Sheamus and Apollo switching and Carmella going to Raw. I don't see any reason. That's not big tippy-toppy stuff that's affected by whether you have The Rock or not. Because having The Rock and not having The Rock means that you need Lashley for one pay-per-view, being the winter months, and then you need Drew for the Rumble, WrestleMania, maybe even WrestleMania. So that's the big difference maker. At the bottom, like lower down, swapping over Apollo to challenge for Priest's belt and Sheamus to challenge for the Intercontinental belt, which is the only belt he hasn't won. All of this stuff, I believe, will still happen. Carmella going over and working, being back with Corey, that kind of stuff has all been set in motion for a while. So, yeah, it's just the big stuff, which is crazy because the big stuff should be absolutely nailed down as we record the show, but it's WWE, so there you go.
I was going to say, they probably don't even know what they're doing yet until right when it happens. So that is it. That is your Wrestling Informer show, and we're going to be here every Friday doing this and giving you the rundown of the news with myself and Mr. Billy Body, your number one source, by the way. Remember that. And boy, the man they love to hate, Billy. They're so mad that you get everything right. They're so pissed off. It's great. I was talking to people online. We don't mess with that clown. I go, I don't even yell back. I go, but he gets everything right. What, and it drives them crazy if you don't yell and scream. So that's that. You could find Billy at Billy K100. This show will be at K100 Informer, and all of my nonsense is at Lingus Mafia.
Can I give my last plug on the last plug here is my handle there is lockbetting.com. Wrestling makes up 5 to 2% of my income. I just do this for fun. It's just something that I've watched since I was 8 years old, and it just so happens now I get the news, and that allows me to laugh at Dave Meltzer, Sean Ross Sapp, Ryan Satin. It's just I like to do. So that's really why I cover wrestling. But my main income comes from being over at the Sports Gambling Podcast, where I do podcasts on soccer, boxing, and MMA as well. And to get my additional content for that, you head over to lockbetting.com. It's a service where I give out my betting picks. I have over 100 months of track profit. Now, if you go to my other Twitter account, not at Billy K100, but at SGP Soccer, which is just my gambling account, where some of you know me from, but I'll no longer be talking about wrestling there. But the pinned tweet is always the P&L from the previous month. So you have a real spreadsheet there. If I was in any way you, my members on my Patreon account or people on Twitter would go, that's not right. That's not right. I didn't win this. I didn't win that. There's none of that at all. Like, I use Patreon because it's like a mini form of social media, and the comment section allows you to be fully transparent. All my spreadsheets are available for free. So it doesn't matter if you're on the $10 tier or the $125 tier. Everybody can see see what we played and can make comments. And I've got the last month's one over at the pin tweet at the SGP Soccer account. Over at lockbetting.com, there's every single spreadsheet. You can ask me to go and see any month. Just put in the search bar P&L, and you'll see that for over 8 years, I haven't had a single losing month in sports betting. So if you want to make that money with me, head over to lockbetting.com, and it's a profit guarantee with that as well. If I don't make you money, which I've never done, not since I started the service, but if it just so happens to be that I don't make you money, you will get that money back.
And a very special thank you to a show that we released this last week on Podcast on a Poll on our iTunes and wherever you get your podcasts. A very special thank you to Eric Bischoff, who was our surprise guest, who was fantastic.
And two things, a special thank you to Conan for hooking that up, because he got us in contact with Eric. And as a thank you back, we are actually doing something quite rare. The video of our show is usually behind a paywall, and then the audio is free, but we are releasing the video to keep it 100. So the whole interview with Eric Bischoff will be released on this channel. So you'll be able to see it. Adam Husey is going to edit that up, and you'll be able to see us talking to Eric Bischoff, who replaced Vince Russo on his own podcast this week, Podcast on a Poll. And you'll be able to see our interview with Eric Bischoff discussing WCW 97 on this YouTube channel, as a thank you to Conan, who hooked that up for us.
For your number one source, that's Billy Body. I'm Cav Manning. See you next week.